Welfare, Back to Work Means Back to School by John Bell. A quick history of the welfare in the United States, a background of the education wage gap. The states struggle with budget regarding welfare. Education is a possible tool to reduce the need for welfare and various program analysis. Cost benefit analysis at the very end. This is all what I'm going to be covering in this. I don't have enough time to go in depth, but I will briefly cover this. One thing I did find as I went through all my research that we found that it's a truism, according to at least one of my researchers, that the more money you make, the more education you have, the more money and the less unemployment that the average person will incur. So therefore, it is naturally a thing that when we're thinking about welfare and we're thinking about people who need uh, funding and money to live on, we need the safety net in case something tragic happens, like the Great Depression or in 2008. We don't want people starving in the streets. However, what we should be doing is concentrating on the everyday when we don't have this horrible looming economic downturn. What is happening to people? Well, number one, we understand that there's the what I call a John Henry effect. Technology is always replacing the lower skilled jobs. You're always going to have that. It doesn't mean that jobs just go away. It means that it's going to now require more skills. So therefore, one thing that we could do to alleviate a lot of welfare is to simply train people, give them education, get them a GED, get them into a 2-year degree if whatever is required, because it is proven just by this chart alone that the higher the education, the more money you will make. Also, according to this chart, you can see that the higher the education, the lower the unemployment rate. Now, you see the point of diminishing returns because in a doctoral degree, it does gain slightly. But if you get your master's degree or professional degree, you can see that it bottoms out at 1.5%. So it's a truism that we can use to our advantage as a society. So we have failed because our even if you look at K through 12, we are spending more. We are spending more than most all other first world countries on our education system, but yet we're getting very little in return for it. Now, I'm going to, in three categories, cover well, it's really two categories, but three categories I'm going to cover that are the primary systems of reform that we have around today. We have the 1994 uh, we have the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act, which was the Clinton Gingrich uh, act that just was putting people back to work as quickly as possible. But we end up with a revolving door if we don't watch it. We end up with people being shoved into, especially these days since the Affordable Care Act, into a large amount of part-time jobs that don't get any, that do not have any form of benefits, and are usually either temporary or really are not sustainable. So you have people with multiple jobs. Things come along, and then the next thing you know, you don't have a job again, and you're back onto the welfare system. Throwing people back into minimum wage, low-skilled jobs once on a welfare system is not the way to do it. What we need to do, as I said, if we refer back, we can get people to stay off of welfare if we just retrain them or educate them, bring them up to a minimum par so that they can be competitive in the workforce. The Promise program that Obama, Newt Gingrich had mentioned, but Obama has recently been trying to tout, has been spreading across the United States, and it's window dressing. It's a last dollar scholarship meant to just cover the gap between what tuition is and what you can afford. It just makes sure that you can go, but however, in most Promise programs, it doesn't cover food, clothing, it doesn't cover gas, it doesn't cover your car maintenance. So therefore, you might be able to go, but then you can't. So the Promise program, according to Robert Kletcher, one of my sources, says that it would be far better spent if there was a stipend along with it. If you take, let's say, for instance, Tennessee Promise program, they have set aside $359 million for this program, and it's based off the lottery system. Most of these education systems are based off of a lottery system, as to not burden the budget. However, in such a case as Illinois, that the education dollars that was supposed to be coming from the lottery ends up in the general fund. But at least in Tennessee's case, they have all this money. They have over $350 million, but they're only spending about $56 million because of the fact that it just doesn't cover very much. Now, if you were to add a stipend along with that, then each person could afford more things, and they could afford to go to college. That is something that is keeping a lot of people from college. Now, the other one is the CalWORKs. Seldom do I ever say California got anything right, but in this case, it's more comprehensive. The California program, it's also called CalWORKs, CalLearn, and it's called the GAIN system in Los Angeles County. And it turns around and it sets you up with a counselor if you're on welfare, and that counselor then assesses are you mentally able to go on to a 2-year college. Then that option is open. However, if you don't even have a GED, it is mandatory you get a GED. And in some cases, it's mandatory for you to get further job training that would match you with local jobs. So with that close work in the counselor, many of my researchers said that is the way to have the highest amount of success. As we can see, and this is going back to the problem, U.S. labor force and participation rate is at its lowest since the 1970s. Now, this doesn't go back all the way to the 70s. I couldn't find a chart that went back that far, but we are at 62. We are at 62.7. Just last April, we were at 62.6. These are low participation rates that, on average, we have at least above a 70. So we have people who have dropped out of even looking for jobs because they become discouraged or for whatever reason. These people are being left behind, possibly because the NAFTA and CAFTA and TPP and the jobs leaving the country. And we could talk about Trump and bringing them back, but nonetheless, if we just elevated their educational level to the next skill level, we could definitely raise this participation rate further. Status quo just does not work because that's what we're looking at on this slide. And here, in the conclusion, we have these two. Now, Kalamazoo Michigan has the Promise program, but Kalamazoo, Michigan, did something unique. It turned the last dollar program into a first dollar program, and it made it a grant style. So therefore, it helps people to pay for the gas, the food, the rent, the clothing, everything that is needed. And it's dependent. It has several dependencies on residency, how long you've been there, whether you went to the Kalamazoo High School and junior high and whatnot. The farther it reaches back, the more you get. And I'm assuming, I did not look into that, but I'm assuming that goes along with the premise that if you go to school someplace and you are educated in one place and you meet your wife in one place, it is more than likely that you will stay connected because you are anchored to that area. So therefore, you are putting back into that local fund. If you can earn more, you're spending more. If you can earn more, you're paying more in taxes. So therefore, it is a plus. It is a win-win for the community. The CalWorks program, it's been around for quite a while. It's been around since even before, even in the 80s. And it has shown, they have stuck with it, and they have tweaked it, and it works well for California. And I am sure that it could work well for many states, as long as you're starting out with some money. Otherwise, it would bankrupt you because they're putting big billions into this system. However, one thing we do need to understand is that the majority of the people on welfare are disabled and elderly or elderly people. So therefore, they don't even fit into this premise. This is the smaller portion that can educate itself, that can work, that is able to work, and that could turn over a negative into a positive. And that's what we're doing. The cost benefit analysis that they did in Kalamazoo, I'm going to just make a quick quote. It's from Bartkin, Herbstein, and Lukowska in 2015. They said, overall, it is also interesting to calculate the Promise's internal rate of return. That is the real discount rate at which benefits equal costs. Our calculations show that this rate equals 11.3%, which by any standards is a high real rate of return. The estimates suggest that the Kalamazoo Promise has economic benefits that exceed program costs. So we can see that there is programs out there that are cost benefit, that they, in the long run especially, will return a rate. Thank you very much.